I imagine she woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that settles like dust in an empty room, the kind that presses down on you the longer you sit in it. She probably reached across the bed, half asleep, expecting to find me there. Her hand would have hit nothing but cold sheets. No sound of the shower running. No coffee brewing. No boots on the hardwood. Just stillness. She might have called out, "Jake." Voice dry, unsure. Like maybe I'd answer from the next room. But I was already gone. She would have sat up then, that feeling creeping in, the kind that starts as a question in your chest and burns hotter the longer it goes unanswered. The closet? Half empty. My clothes? Gone. Dresser drawers? Cleared out. Truck? Not in the driveway. And on the kitchen table, waiting in that patch of morning light, was all I left behind. A folded piece of paper. My wedding ring. That's when she knew. Not that something was wrong. That something was over. But let's go back to the very beginning of this story. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to question his wife's honesty. I believed that if you treated someone right, stayed loyal, worked hard, and came home every night, then things would hold together. Maybe that's naive. Or maybe that's just how I was raised. My old man worked the same job at the sawmill for 33 years. My mom stayed home and kept us fed, and their biggest fight was about whether or not to get a new washer. Simple folks. Simple love. Sarah and I met back in college. She worked part-time at the library, and I'd come in pretending I needed help with the printer, just so I could talk to her. She had this sharp laugh and eyes that could disarm a man with just one blink. I was hooked. A year later, we moved in together. 2 years after that, we were married in a little barn out in Wilton, under string lights in the eyes of everyone who mattered to us. We had our ups and downs like everyone else. Bills, work, the long dry spells where you forget to ask how the other person's really doing. But I never thought for a second that she'd step out on me. Not until that Friday night. It was late, close to 11. I was half asleep on the couch, dog curled at my feet, some rerun playing with the volume down low. My phone buzzed. It was Rick, my buddy since high school. We'd lost touch for a bit, but lately we'd been grabbing beers again, talking shop, reminiscing about our younger days. The kind of guy who, even if we hadn't spoken in a year, I'd trust to tell me the hard truth. His voice was low when I answered. "Hey, man. Sorry to call this late." I rubbed my eyes. "What's up? You know Sarah's at that lake house party up on Route 9, right?" My stomach did something weird. "No." She said she had a girls' night. Dinner and drinks in town. He was quiet for a second, then said, "Well, she's up at Darren's place. Big fire pit going, music loud enough to rattle the windows." I didn't even know it was a party until I showed up with my cousin. Figured I'd stop in, say hey to a few people from work. I sat up straight. "You sure it was her?" "Yeah, man. I wasn't even looking for her, but there she was. She didn't see me. She was out by the fire with a bunch of folks. One guy had his hand on her back, like he owned her. Not like a friend. Looked real comfortable." My mouth went dry. I stared at the wall, waiting for him to laugh or say something to soften the blow, but he didn't. Just silence. "I thought you'd want to know," he added. I thanked him and hung up. My hands were shaking, just a little. Not rage. Not yet. More like confusion. Dread. That itchy kind of anxiety that creeps under your skin when something don't add up. I didn't call her. I didn't blow up her phone. I just sat there like a fool, staring at the front door, waiting to hear her keys in the lock. She came home just after midnight. I could hear her humming to herself as she walked in, slipping off her boots in the mudroom. She didn't see me on the couch, lights were off. She smelled like smoke and cheap perfume, her cheeks flushed from the cold or the drinks or whatever else she'd been doing. She walked right past me, up the stairs, and into the bedroom. I just sat there. Didn't say a word. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about that guy's hand. That hand on her back. I didn't know who he was or what he meant to her, but I knew enough to know she hadn't mentioned him. And that silence was louder than any scream. Morning came, and she acted like it was just another Saturday. Made coffee, asked if I wanted eggs, talked about how loud the bar had been. Said her throat was sore from laughing. I watched her from across the table, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't believe a damn word coming out of her mouth. That's when it hit me. Not a punch, not a breakdown. Just cold clarity. I needed to know the truth. I wasn't going to throw accusations without proof. I wasn't going to yell or cry or beg. That's not who I am. I wanted the truth solid, undeniable, gut-punch truth. I knew it might break me, but not knowing would rot me from the inside out. I stared at her hand as it stirred sugar into her coffee. No ring. She must have forgotten to wear it again. I didn't ask why. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and said I was heading to the hardware store. I wasn't. That was the moment. The exact second I crossed the line from good husband to something else. I needed answers. And no matter what I found, I wasn't coming back the same man. That part of me, the trusting, naive guy who thought love was enough, he died right then and there at that kitchen table. And the man who stood up? He was ready for the truth. I didn't have the means to follow her around myself, not without raising suspicion. I was still working full-time, and Sarah, she had a job with flex hours, as she called it. Some days she left early, came home late, claimed she had team meetings, networking dinners, client calls. I wanted to believe her. God help me, I wanted to believe her. But trust isn't blind. It's earned. And something about her lately felt rehearsed. Her laughs felt lighter, more frequent. Her touch, less so. So I made a call. A quiet one. I didn't even save the number in my phone. Pete was an ex-cop. Retired early after busting his knee in a raid. Worked freelance now, mostly insurance fraud cases, sometimes tracking down runaways, every now and then stuff like this. Friend of a friend kind of guy. First thing he asked me was if I was sure. No, I said. But I need to be. He didn't ask questions after that. Said he'd start Monday. That week crawled by like molasses in winter. Every time Sarah walked out the door, I wondered what lie she was walking under. Monday, she said she had a team dinner. Tuesday, her friend Allison needed help moving. Wednesday, her boss asked her to stay late. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and told her to drive safe. Inside, I was boiling. Pete kept it professional. Gave me a burner phone for updates, told me to stay calm and keep my normal routine. If you act different, she'll notice. Let me do the looking. That was his line. I did my best. By Thursday, I'd gotten quiet. More than usual. Sarah didn't seem to notice. She was busy. Her phone buzzed more often. Her eyes lit up when she checked it. She laughed out loud at texts and turned the screen away from me like it was second nature. That night, Pete sent me the first photo. It was grainy, taken from across a parking lot, but there was no mistaking her silhouette. Sarah, wrapped in a coat I'd bought her last Christmas, leaning against a man's shoulder while unlocking the door to an apartment building I didn't recognize. Second time this week, Pete texted. Same guy. Different car yesterday, but same place. My stomach turned. I stared at the photo for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't do a damn thing but sit on the edge of my bed with that phone in my hand, breathing like I'd just run a mile uphill. Friday, I got video. Pete set up near the building with a long lens, stayed out of sight. He caught her laughing, flipping her hair, letting him hold her hand like it belonged to him. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look like she was hiding. If anything, she looked lighter, freer, like someone who'd left her old life behind already and just hadn't bothered telling me. Saturday morning, I met Pete in person. We sat in the back of a diner that smelled like burnt toast and old coffee. He slid me a manila folder across the table like we were in some old noir film. Inside photos. Clearer ones. My wife and that man. Hugging in parking lots. Going into his apartment. Coming out the next morning in fresh clothes. And one still shot from a bit of audio Pete caught, her voice clear as crystal through the microphone he planted under his jacket. Stop, baby, she said, giggling. You're gonna make me late. That one word, baby, felt like a bullet. I folded the folder shut and handed it back. You keep it, he said, sipping his coffee. You paid for it. Whatever you decide to do next, that's your business. I paid the tab and walked out into the cold. And still, I didn't confront her. Now I needed to think like someone else. Someone she didn't know. Someone who was watching her with new eyes. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was the man she didn't see coming. Sarah still smiled at me like everything was fine. Still asked about my day. Still offered me coffee in the morning. Still laughed at her phone like it held the world. And I played along. I nodded at the right times. Took out the trash. Asked about her meetings. I became a ghost in my own house, and she didn't even notice. While she was playing house, I was preparing for war. It started small. I made excuses to leave work early. Said I had dentist appointments or needed to pick up parts for the truck. But I wasn't at the dentist. I was at the bank. We had 3 joint accounts. One for bills, one for savings, and a small investment portfolio. I started moving funds. Slowly. Carefully. Not enough to trigger questions. Just enough to start building a cushion. I opened a private checking account in a different town under my middle name. Sarah didn't know my middle name was ever on any paperwork. I made sure of that. I sold some tools I didn't use anymore, my old welding rig, a backup compressor, even my gun safe, and put that money in cash envelopes I tucked behind the insulation in the garage wall. I labeled them camping gear in case she ever went snooping, but I knew she wouldn't. Sarah had lost interest in my world a long time ago. Next was work. I'd been at the same shop for 11 years. Good folks, decent pay, but it wasn't hard to walk away from. I gave my notice under the pretense of a family emergency out west, said my uncle had left me a small property, and I had to go deal with the estate. Everyone shook my hand and offered their prayers. I smiled and thanked them. What they didn't know was that I already had a new job lined up under a different name. Same trade, same skills, different state. Pete helped me find it. Turns out he had connections beyond just surveillance. Said he respected the way I was handling things. I wasn't sure if I deserved the compliment, but I nodded anyway. I started renting a place about 90 minutes away. Little house at the edge of a small town with a wood stove, a screened porch, and a busted shed out back I could fix up when I needed to clear my head. Paid 6 months up front in cash. No lease. No trace. I told my parents the truth, or most of it. I said Sarah had changed, that I was stepping away for good, and that if she ever came asking, they were to tell her nothing. Same with my sister. Same with Rick. I made them all promise, and I could see the worry in their eyes, but they nodded. "You're sure about this?" my dad asked me. "Dead sure," I said. I started scanning every important document I could find: birth certificates, insurance forms, tax records, house deeds, car titles. I organized them into folders, labeled them plain and boring: appliance warranties, health info, garage receipts. Then I put them all on a flash drive. But not just any flash drive, an encrypted one, locked down with a password only I knew. I stuck a little sticker on the front that said barbecue recipes, just in case someone got curious. And every night, I'd come home, eat dinner across from a woman I no longer recognized, and pretend I was fine. She'd tell me about a funny thing someone said at work, or how traffic was bad, or how she was thinking about taking a weekend trip to recharge. I'd nod, offer her more green beans, ask about her mom. She never once noticed I'd stopped talking about my job. She never once asked what I was working on in the garage at night. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was just methodical. Like I'd finally understood that I'd been playing checkers while she'd been playing a whole different game. I wasn't going to flip the board. I was going to win. The more I uncovered, the more lies I caught, the more little details I noticed, the colder I became. She had whole routines now. Certain perfumes she wore only when she said she had work events. Specific jackets she kept in her trunk. Apps on her phone that I'd never seen before. It was like peeling back wallpaper and finding mold. The closer you looked, the worse it got. But I said nothing. Because one day, she'd wake up and I'd be gone. And when that day came, I wanted every screw turned, every hinge oiled, every step measured. I didn't want to make a sound when I left. I wanted to vanish so clean, she'd think I never existed at all. The sky cracked open that Thursday night like it knew what I was about to do. I'd watched the forecast all day, rain moving in hard from the west, thunder trailing it like a pack of hounds. Fitting. I didn't want sunshine or calm skies. I wanted weather that felt like my head, loud, stormy, and full of the kind of pressure that makes your joints ache. I drove Sarah's route in reverse. Out of our quiet little suburb, past the strip mall where she sometimes said she got her nails done, around the corner from that gas station she always mentioned in passing. I knew where I was going. Pete had given me the address. I hadn't asked for it, but he gave it to me anyway, like a loaded gun left on a kitchen table. Just in case, he'd said. I parked 3 blocks away. Wore a ball cap low and a plain black hoodie. No plate on the front of the car. Left my phone at home, the battery pulled. This wasn't the kind of errand you ran with a tracker in your pocket. The apartment complex wasn't anything special. Low-rise, with dull beige siding and a busted security gate that looked like it hadn't worked since the Clinton administration. I buzzed in through the main door when some college kid came out carrying a pizza box. Slipped in like I belonged there. Unit 3C. 3rd floor. Into the hall. My boots were soaked by the time I reached the door, rain dripping from the bill of my hat. My hands were steady, though. Real steady. I knocked. Not loud. Just 3 hard raps, enough to say, "I know you're in there." Door opened slower than I expected. He looked at me like I was a delivery guy. "Yeah." He was younger than I thought. Maybe 30. Sweatpants, a cheap t-shirt, holding a beer bottle loose in one hand like he was 2 drinks into a lazy night. "You know who I am?" I asked. His brow furrowed. "No. Should I? I'm Sarah's husband." His whole face changed, like a curtain dropping. That beer bottle froze mid-air. He didn't say anything for a second, and that silence was long enough for me to push the door wide with one arm and step inside. He backed up fast, tripping a little over his own feet. "What the hell are you?" "You need to leave town," I said, voice flat as a rusted blade. "You're going to block her number. You're going to break it off. You're going to forget she exists." He looked at me, tried to gather some bravado, puff his chest. "Or what?" he said, with this little smirk, like maybe I was bluffing. Like maybe he thought this was just a wounded man trying to act tough. That was the moment something in me broke. I didn't plan it. I didn't think. I just moved. I shoved him hard in the chest with my left hand, hard enough to send him stumbling back into the side table by the couch. He swung at me. I saw it coming a mile away. Sloppy, wild, no weight behind it. I ducked it and buried my right fist into his gut so deep he let out a sound like a deflated tire. He dropped to his knees, coughing, one hand on the floor, the other gripping his stomach. I crouched beside him. I'd eye. "Next time, it won't be just a bruise," I said, my voice calm, almost polite. "You think she's worth this?" "She's not." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I could see it in his face. He'd never expected this. Never expected the guy she lied to, tiptoed around, and probably laughed about behind his back, to show up in his doorway like a hammer. I stood up, looked around the room. It was messy. Empty pizza boxes, a TV playing muted sports, and a coffee table with some receipts and Sarah's name scrawled on a note. I picked up the note, folded it, stuck it in my jacket pocket. "Block her number tonight," I said. "Delete her from everything. If she ever contacts you again, you ignore it. If you reach out to her, I'll know. And I'll come back." He nodded without looking up. I walked out the door without another word. Closed it gently behind me like I'd just returned a borrowed tool. By the time I reached the stairs, I could hear him coughing again. I didn't feel good about what I did. I didn't feel bad, either. I just felt clean. Like I'd finally wiped the slate. One last gift. Not for her. For me. Outside, the storm had finally hit full force. Rain slammed into the sidewalk like nails. Thunder cracked so loud it made the building tremble. I stood in it for a minute, letting it soak through my clothes, drip down my back. I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I'd done what I came to do. And now, I could move forward. I woke up before the sun that Saturday morning. The world outside was still wrapped in blue fog, the kind that clings to the ground and makes everything feel slow, like time's holding its breath. I sat at the edge of the bed, stared at the wall, and listened to the sound of Sarah's breathing, steady, soft, unaware. There was a time when I used to wake up and watch her sleep, thinking I was the luckiest man alive. That time felt like it belonged to someone else now. Some other version of me that hadn't seen what I'd seen. That man was long gone. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. The order of it. What to take, what to leave, what to say and what not to say. I didn't want yelling. I didn't want one last fight, or some drawn-out scene where we both pretended this could still be salvaged. I wanted silence. Precision. A clean cut. I stood up slow, careful not to make the mattress creak. My bag was already packed. 1 duffel, 3 changes of clothes, my laptop, my flash drive, a wad of cash rolled tight and wrapped in a rubber band. Everything else could rot in that house for all I cared. My truck keys were in my jacket pocket. The folder with the papers sat neatly on the kitchen table, exactly where she'd find it the second she came downstairs. On top of it, my wedding ring. Not in a box. Not in an envelope. Just lying there, plain and cold like it meant nothing anymore. Next to that, a note written in my own hand, on the back of an old grocery list. No signature. No date. Just words I knew she'd remember. I knew. For a long time. You didn't just cheat on me. You made me feel small. I'll never be that man again. I didn't leave pictures. I didn't leave keys. I didn't even leave the coffee pot on. She would wake up, walk down the stairs like any other Saturday, and find a version of her life she never saw coming. No trace of me in the closet. No boots by the door. The silence would feel different. Heavier. I wanted it to. My phone was already powered off, the battery pulled. No pings. No calls. No apologies sent too late. I'd left behind a burner number for legal matters only, routed through a service out of state. I wouldn't answer. Not unless I had to. By 6:30, I was on the highway. The fog began to lift just past the county line. Fields stretched out on both sides, slick with dew, and the sun started to crack through the clouds in pieces, like glass shattering in reverse. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need noise. The quiet was finally starting to feel like mine again. I took back roads most of the way. Not because I thought she'd follow, I knew she wouldn't. Not right away. But it felt safer. Slower. Like I could shake off the weight with every mile. When I reached the little house I'd rented, it was just as I remembered. Plain siding, a porch that needed paint, and a crooked mailbox that leaned like it was tired of standing. I parked around back, unloaded my bag, and stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and pine. No pictures on the wall. No furniture yet. Just four walls and a door I could lock behind me. I breathed in deep. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had space inside my own ribs again. I spent the rest of that day cleaning, wiping down windowsills, sweeping corners, installing the deadbolt I'd brought with me. Not because I thought someone would come looking, but because it gave me something to do with my hands while my head tried to catch up. By evening, I made a small dinner, eggs, toast, coffee, sat at the little kitchen table and stared out the window at nothing in particular. The sun dipped behind the trees, and the sky went orange like a flame burning low. I wasn't thinking about her. Not really. I was thinking about peace. About how long it had been since I'd felt like my life belonged to me. Somewhere, not far away, she was probably reading that note. Probably pacing the kitchen, trying to make sense of it. Maybe crying. Maybe angry. Maybe calling people I'd already warned not to answer. But none of that mattered anymore. I was gone. And I wasn't coming back. I didn't see the aftermath, not firsthand anyway. I was gone by then, living in the little house out past the hills, working under a new name and building something quiet. But I heard about it. Word travels. Especially in small towns. Especially when something that messy hits the surface. Sarah woke up that Saturday and realized her world had cracked in two. She found the papers, the ring, the note. She called my phone. I know, because the burner line logged 11 missed calls in 1 hour. I never picked up. I never responded. She started going down the list after that. She called Rick first, my oldest friend. He told me she left a voicemail at 3 in the morning. Said she was worried, that something might have happened to me. Rick didn't answer. Just deleted it. Then she tried my sister. My dad. Even my old boss at the shop. She thought I just vanished. Which I had. But not in the way she imagined. I'd warned everyone in advance. Told them if she came around asking, they were to say nothing. Not to lie, just to tell her I wasn't in touch. That I'd gone off to sort through some things. They didn't all agree with my methods, but they respected the pain behind them. They understood I needed space to breathe, and for once, nobody tried to fix it for me. Sarah even posted online old photos of us together, some long, rambling paragraph underneath about losing someone you love and trying to find peace. I didn't read it myself. A friend sent me a screenshot. I closed it before I finished the second sentence. She wasn't looking for me. She was looking for sympathy. The thing about guilt is it changes people. Not right away. Not on the surface. But slowly, like water seeping into the cracks of a foundation. It wears you down. Turns your reflection into something you don't recognize. From what I heard, she started showing up places I used to go. The diner. The hardware store. She even sat outside my parents' house once, just idling in her car like maybe she was building up the nerve to knock. But she never did. 8 months went by. 8 months of silence. 8 months of me gathering every record, every receipt, every photo, every message Pete had sent me. I filed everything in a clean black folder labeled only with her initials. I made copies. I backed it up. I built the case like a man building a fence, strong, even, and impossible to push over. When the court date came, I walked in calm, clean-shaven, good boots, button-down shirt ironed that morning. No anger. No shaking hands. Just facts. Sarah walked in behind me and looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. She wore a blazer she never used to wear, probably borrowed, and makeup that couldn't hide the toll the last few months had taken. I barely recognized her. She didn't make eye contact. Not once. My lawyer laid it all out. The surveillance. The messages. The hotel charges. The hidden bank withdrawals she thought I didn't know about. The emotional stuff, too. The way she gaslit me for months. The manipulation. The coldness. All of it packaged neat and tied with a bow. She didn't deny it. What could she say? It was right there in black and white. The judge barely had questions. It was as open and shut as these things get. She got nothing. Not the house. That was in my name. Not the savings. I'd protected what I'd built. Not even the dog. Our old mutt, Rocky, who used to curl up at her feet, but somehow always followed me to the door every morning. When the gavel dropped, she didn't say a word. She stood up slow, like the weight of it all had finally settled on her shoulders. For a moment, I thought she might speak. Maybe say sorry. Maybe ask why. But she didn't. She just walked out of the courtroom like a ghost floating through a storm. I stayed behind for a while, signed the last papers, shook my lawyer's hand. Then I walked out into the parking lot, breathed in the fall air, and let it all settle. The sky was gray, and the wind was picking up. I zipped up my coat and looked around at the world I used to live in, the courthouse, the cars, the faces passing by, and felt like I was standing on the other side of a long, hard chapter. It was done, for real this time, and I didn't look back. Sarah's life, on the other hand, started crumbling almost as soon as the ink dried on those divorce papers. First came the whispers. Small town like ours, people talk. Always have. Always will. I didn't spread anything, not even once, but the story was already out there. Folks aren't dumb. When a man disappears, then comes back with a folder full of truth and walks out the winner of a courtroom fight that quick, people start putting two and two together. Someone must have talked. Maybe one of the court clerks. Maybe someone who saw the evidence packet. Maybe just an old friend with a big mouth and a bigger audience. Whatever it was, the story grew legs. Soon enough, everybody in town seemed to know. The other man had a name now, one that got whispered in barbershops and passed around over lunch breaks. I never spoke it aloud. Didn't need to. It stopped being about him long ago. It was about what she did and what it said about who she was. I heard through the grapevine that her firm let her go 2 weeks after the ruling. Personal conduct unbecoming of a senior associate, or something dressed up in HR language. Truth is, it wasn't just the gossip, it was the clients. Some of them backed out. Others asked questions. Some, I imagine, just didn't want to do business with someone whose face was attached to a scandal that hit way too close to home. She lost her job. Then she lost her apartment. Couldn't afford the lease without a steady paycheck. A mutual acquaintance told me she was living out of a motel by the highway. One of those places with flickering signs and vending machines that eat your dollar and give nothing back. I didn't check. Didn't need to see it with my own eyes. I believed it. A few months after that, someone ran into her at the pharmacy, waiting on a prescription with a face that looked like it hadn't smiled in weeks. She didn't notice them. Head down, hands shaking. She'd lost weight, I was told. Looked tired all the way into her bones. Another friend mentioned she was trying to hold on to part-time work. Temp gigs, short contracts, anything she could land. Some days she made it. Some days she didn't. I never asked for details. If people brought her up, I listened. But I never prodded. She started seeing less and less of the people we used to know. Those brunch friends and happy hour girls all went quiet. That's how it is sometimes. People don't like getting too close to someone with a story that makes them uncomfortable. I won't lie. There were moments where I wanted to feel vindicated. Like maybe I should have smiled, raised a glass, said justice served. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because deep down, what I felt wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't joy. It was closure. Cold and quiet. She did it to herself. All of it. I didn't destroy her. I just got out of the way and let the truth land where it landed. When you live a lie long enough, it eventually runs out of places to hide. Hers did. There were nights, early on, where I'd wonder if she was out there thinking of me, wondering how I pulled it off, trying to figure out when I started planning my exit. But those thoughts came less and less. I didn't hold on to them like I used to. I focused on fixing up the little house. Work kept me busy. So did Rocky, the dog, who seemed to understand that life had shifted and we both had a little more breathing room now. I built a fire pit out back. Started chopping wood again. Grew tomatoes in old feed buckets along the porch. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I didn't wish her harm. Not even then. I just didn't want to carry her weight anymore. And when folks tried to update me on how she was doing, where she was living, what she might have said, I just nodded and let them talk, then changed the subject. I had nothing left to say about her. Not because I hated her, but because I'd finally, completely, let go. And that was her real punishment. Not the job, not the rumors, not even the motel room. It was losing access to the man who once would have done anything for her. losing the version of me she thought would always be there. She buried that man herself. I just built the headstone. It was a quiet morning, the kind I'd come to appreciate. No alarms, no rush, just me, a bottomless cup of black coffee, and a plate of eggs cooked the way I liked. The diner sat off a county road, 2 towns over from where I'd built my new life. Regulars came and went. Nobody asked questions. Nobody looked twice. That's the kind of peace I'd carved out for myself. Earned, maybe. I was halfway through my second cup when I saw her. She was standing on the sidewalk, outside the window, coat zipped to her chin, hands in her pockets. Her hair was tied back in one of those loose ponytails she used to do when she didn't care who saw her. No makeup, no jewelry. Just her face, older than I remembered it, thinner too, with eyes that looked like they'd been carrying too many sleepless nights. She spotted me a few seconds later. Her eyes widened, just slightly. Then her shoulders dropped, and she took a breath like she was walking into something she couldn't undo. I didn't flinch. Just kept sipping my coffee. The bell over the door jingled as she stepped inside. She hesitated near the coat rack, like she was deciding whether or not to go through with it. Then she made her way over, slow, like a deer that wasn't sure if it was about to get shot or fed. "Hi," she said, voice soft, cracking at the edge. I nodded once, polite. Didn't say a word. "Do you mind if I sit?" I waved my hand at the booth across from me, like a man offering a stranger the seat next to him on a bus. She sat, hands folded in her lap, eyes scanning my face like maybe there was a version of me in there she still recognized. "I've been looking for you," she said. "For months. Thought maybe you moved out west." I didn't respond. Just kept eating my eggs, slow and steady. She looked down, swallowed, then back at me. "I'm not here to fight. Or ask for anything. She paused. "I just wanted to talk. Maybe be friends." That word hung in the air like a bad smell. "Friends," I said, setting my fork down. "No." Her lips tightened. Her eyes watered, but she blinked the tears back before they could fall. "But I do wish you peace," I said after a moment, voice steady. She nodded slowly, like she knew that was the most she'd get. There was a long stretch of silence between us. The kind that weighs heavy but doesn't crush. She finally broke it. "Can I ask you something?" I didn't stop her. "When did you know? How did it all start?" I leaned back in the booth, grabbed a napkin, and wiped my hands clean. My eyes drifted toward the window, where the trees were still bare, waiting for spring. "It started at that party," I said. "Lake House up on Route 9. Rick saw you there. Said some guy had his hand on you like he owned you." She looked down at the table, face pale. She didn't try to deny it. I didn't believe him at first, I went on. But deep down, I think I already knew. That was the crack. The first one. After that, I started paying attention. She closed her eyes. "I didn't think you'd ever find out." I let out a dry laugh, more breath than sound. "That's the thing," I said, pushing the empty plate aside. "You stopped thinking about me a long time ago." She didn't argue. She couldn't. "I'm not proud of everything I did," she said finally. "But I'm not the same person I was." "Neither am I," I said. Another silence passed. The waitress came by, topped off my coffee, didn't even glance at Sarah. Like she knew this wasn't a shared breakfast. "I'm trying to get back on my feet," she added, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded once. Not in pity, not in anger, just acknowledgement. That's all I had left for her. She looked at me then, really looked. Like maybe she was trying to memorize what peace looked like on someone she used to know. "I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking again. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. I stood, dropped the tin on the table, and slid my coat on. "Take care of yourself," I said. Then I walked out the door. The cold morning air felt good. Clean. A little sharp, but honest. I slid into my truck, started it up, and pulled out onto the road without looking back. Whatever she was hoping for, whatever questions still lived in the corners of her mind, that was her burden to carry now. Mine was already behind me. I drove off into the sunlight, a free man. Share your thoughts in the comments. How would the story have changed if the narrator had confronted Sarah immediately after the party? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.